Welcome everybody to Gratitude Tuesday. My name is Michael Trager. I'm the Vice President for Development here at FAIR, Food Allergy Research and Education. So excited to participate in Gratitude Tuesday, which is part of Food Allergy Awareness Week. Today's our day of giving, so we will be having a conversation with one of our Board of Governors members, Kim Hartman. Kim is an entrepreneur, owns her own design company here in New York City, a philanthropist, a leader, an advocate, and someone that I've had the privilege of knowing for the last 10 plus years. And has been a mentor of mine as well. So Kim, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to Gratitude Tuesday here at FAIR.
Thank you, Michael. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So we are going to have a conversation, talk a little bit about FAIR, Kim's involvement, things that she's seen in the nonprofit space. But first, let's just get a little bit of an insight into you and how you came to FAIR. So maybe you could share a little bit about your family's food allergy journey, your family's story, how you got into food allergies and how really you came to FAIR.
So we have 3 children, my husband, Alan, and I, and our youngest, Andy, was diagnosed with food allergies at the age of 13 months when he had an anaphylactic reaction at a birthday party. And we sort of couldn't believe what was going on until it was really going on. And, you know, back then, Andy is now 21. Back then, there were a lot of resources out there, but they were sort of scattered and it was hard to find information out. But I was very, very lucky because I had met a fellow food allergic parent through my older daughter, and she really took me under her wing and showed me the ropes. And then the community started to open up, and through FAN and FAI, which has now become FAIR, I was able to form a community and find places, doctors, and learn more and get access as much as I could. You know, 21 years ago is a long time.
Oh my gosh, very different times too.
So,
well, awesome. And Andy, as you said, is 21 years old now. So when you think back 20 years ago, and obviously you and Alan experiencing this, you know, as a lot of our viewers have this, their child or themselves going through an anaphylactic reaction and not knowing what's happening. Obviously today there's a lot more awareness and thanks to FAIR and our leaders like you who've been able to scale that information. You know, I guess what advice would you give a newly diagnosed family today, right? What advice would you give to the Kim Hartman who's experiencing that for the first time with their child?
I mean, I think my best piece of advice is don't settle. Treat this like anything else in your life. Do not take the status quo or the advice of, okay, you have to just avoid this as your only option. There are lots of opportunities out there. There's lots of good doctors. The FAIR Clinical Network has over 50 sites across 23 states. We have tons of resources that show you the allergists that might be in your community. And, you know, don't just take from your pediatrician who might say to you, or, you know, your general practice doctor who might say, just avoid that food or just avoid this, because, you know, that is a very hard road ahead. And it's 2022 and we have a lot of options. And, you know, don't forget that you're not alone.
That is great advice. And it's interesting. There's 32 million Americans with food allergies, but yet you could be in a situation where you do feel alone because it is a lonely thing when yourself or your child is going through that. So thank you for sharing that. What was some good advice? So 20 years ago, you know, a lot of this infrastructure didn't exist. You referenced FAI and FAN. 10 years ago, that merged to create FAIR, and we're recognizing that right now through our 10th anniversary celebration. Was there any one piece of advice? You referenced a family member or a friend of a family friend that was helpful for you. Was there one piece of advice that you garnered really early in your journey that really kind of carried you through, or was it what you just shared?
That's a good question. I guess I would say, you know, this friend of mine, shout out to Amy Kirschenbaum. She, as a general rule, she's a very chill person. You know, she's type A personality, but she's a, you know, pretty chill person. And, you know, she sort of allowed me to see that you can take it in stride. Her older daughter, Lenny, still lives with her food allergies, and she's 32 years old. And so I was able to see through watching Lenny grow up that it was possible to live with a food allergic child and not have to be afraid of leaving your house. But there's, and then, as I said, I was very lucky to find a community of people in New York who had food allergic children who had gone through it before me, even if they were only a couple of months ahead of me. That made the world of difference and made it feel like you weren't alone. But over the years, there were times that Andy had, an allergic reaction here, or had to be, we had to take him to the emergency room because we thought he was having an allergic reaction. There was one time where, teaching a friend, I stabbed myself with the EpiPen that was real and not the trainer.
Oh, no.
Yes. Yes. I was like, oh, this is so easy. This is what you do. No problem, like this. And then the needle came out and I was like, oh my God. And I quickly called Dr. Sisher and said, I just stabbed myself with an EpiPen. What am I going to do now?
Well, I hope,
Yeah.
well, at least you're able to share with Andy the experience of going through epinephrine when anaphylactic,
Yes.
which is the right thing to do, right? If you have a reaction, use your epinephrine. We're getting a number of questions into the chat. So those listening, please fire your questions away at Kim and I, and hopefully we could answer all of them or some of them. One that just came through was, as a food allergy mom specifically, why do you think it's still so hard to convince people that food allergies is a life-threatening disease? This is more than just a peanut or whatever is the question. And obviously we know that there's top 9 allergens, sesame being the 9th that was just approved and signed into law by President Biden earlier, about a year ago. And shout out to all the advocates that were part of that, knocking on doors. Next week is food allergy, is our food allergy fly-in. So please sign up for that if you haven't, for FAIR. But I guess, you experienced this 20 years ago, and now being a part of the community, being a leader of this organization, why do you think it's still so hard to convince some people?
I think until you actually live it, it's like anything else in life. It doesn't necessarily affect you. Saying to people, 1 in 3 kids is a food allergic kid, or saying every 3 minutes, someone in this country, every 3 minutes, somebody has an anaphylactic reaction or a food allergic reaction that sends them to the emergency room, doesn't really resonate. But if you endear yourself to people and you rely on them to help you, I hate to coin Hillary Clinton, but it does take a village.
Yeah.
Not because I'm not a Hillary fan, but politics aside, I think that it really takes, I'm hoping that through FAIR and through advocacy, that we can continue to educate people about how serious it is. And that's why I'm passionate about it, because I think it's really important. People slough it off and act like, well, it's not a big deal. I don't need to eat peanuts. I don't really care. It is a big deal. Touching peanuts, breathing in the peanut dust, all of those things affect different people and are life-threatening. And I think if we've learned anything these past 2 years during the pandemic, it's that it's scary to not know and to not understand what could happen to you. And so I think if people take a step back for a second and think about March of 2020 and how scary that felt, not knowing what COVID was, what it was going to feel like, what it was going to affect, how it was going to affect your family, that is the way a food allergic parent feels that day one when their kid gets diagnosed with the food allergy.
That's a great analogy. Not knowing if you're going to go out and get sick because you got on the subway or the bus or wherever you,
an airplane,
an airplane, and not knowing if you're going to sit next to somebody that's going to have an allergy and you're going to order something that you've ordered from the same restaurant every single day, but yet somehow there's a cross contamination. That is what our community goes through. And that is why we're all here, right? Obviously learning from you and your expertise, but also that's FAIR's job. How do we mitigate risk today while we aggressively find scientific and clinical solutions tomorrow? And that's what we're trying to do. So for all those viewing, please continue with your questions and thank you for submitting them. And also please consider a donation because your support is vital to helping us, again, mitigate risk today while we aggressively try to find clinical solutions for you and your families. Another question just coming in here is, how does the world of food allergy look different today than it did 10 years ago when FAIR merged, then the merger creating FAIR took place?
Well, first of all, in 2020, the FDA approved, I always say it wrong, Palforzia for peanut allergies, for the treatment of peanut allergies. Andy, back in 2014, was part of a clinical trial to desensitize him from his peanut allergies, his tree nut allergies, and the allergies that he suffered from. Most kids suffer from more than one of the 9 allergies, as do some adults. But he was part of that clinical trial, and he now basically his body is desensitized and he doesn't have to worry about cross-contamination, and he can live a more normal life. And I am eternally grateful to the doctors and the people who did the research and who have pioneered the field of OIT, which is oral immunotherapy, which is just one part of the options that are out there. And 10 years ago, that was just starting. Yeah. And the FDA didn't know what that even meant, I don't think.
No, it's a great point. Well, first, congratulations. And I think we all know in this community, it takes a lot of courage and guts to go through a clinical trial, to participate in new science, because there is an unknown, and that is scary. And it takes a lot of courage, not just from Andy, obviously from Andy, but from you and Alan and your entire family of siblings. So congrats, that's amazing. And I think it also speaks to an important point of, fast forward from there almost 10 years, and you're still engaged. You're still not only involved with FAIR, you're the co-chair of our board of governors. You are helping us advance this mission with a focus on research, a focus on scientific solutions. Why are you still engaged in FAIR since your family has had success? What keeps you involved with FAIR, and why is that important to
you? We got lucky, and I appreciate the compliment, and it took a lot of hard work and effort by everybody in my family and our friends and our community. But I don't want to stop there. I want to see everybody else get as lucky as we did. I really feel that in our lifetime, we should see a cure for this disease, because it is a disease. And if I don't step up and help now, I don't know. I just don't think you can turn your back on something. I mean, for all these years, the people who I knew, FAI, FAN, the walks we did, all that, they supported my family, and the doctors, they supported us. So I want to give back to them and support them in their research, in the education. I want more people to understand that there are options. I feel it's imperative that we find a solution for this and that we offer people options.
Well, I could not agree more, and thank you. And it's exciting, the science that's behind there. We won't dive into that on this conversation. It is moving, it is advancing, and I know it doesn't necessarily impact the families that are listening today or tomorrow, but the future is bright in this space because of the leaders and the courageous families that dive into clinical trials and studies and sign up for the patient registry, and your donations, and also because of these amazing scientists and clinicians who are advancing this. So thank you to everybody who's doing that. There's a question in here, but I'm gonna quickly pivot for a second, because you referenced how you have 3 children, and Andy has 2 older siblings. And what we all know about food allergies, it's not just impacting that one person, it impacts the entire family. It impacts the entire network, your parents, Alan's parents, your nieces and nephews, and so forth. So I guess, how did Andy's siblings react to not being able to have these foods in the house? And were you able to kind of take them out and walk down the block and sneak them their favorite candy bar or things like that? Or I guess talk a little bit about their courage, because they're a part of this, and being supportive of their sibling as well.
So, I mean, we could not have done it without them. Um, Katie is 5 years older than Andy, and Max is 3.5. And, um, it was challenging at first, but I think because they had been exposed to other children who had food allergies at school, it wasn't so foreign to them. They neither Katie nor Max had the kind of food allergies that Andy had when he was younger, but they both experienced some level of allergies. So they were sensitive to it already, but it really was a team effort. And there were definitely time. I mean, there were vacations we didn't take because I was afraid,
Yeah.
or there were things we didn't do, desserts we didn't order, things we didn't do because of Andy's food allergies. And, I don't think they ever once considered it a sacrifice. I can't remember having arguments about not having peanut butter in the house. I mean, it just, it was who we were. I mean, and to this day, we are a family that is incredibly sensitive to food allergies. Andy doesn't eat nuts. He doesn't like them. He, you know, he sort of, just avoids them, not because he has to anymore, just because he doesn't have a taste for them. It's
Yeah.
not in his world.
They were not his friends, for lack of a better term,
Right.
for a long time.
They were poison.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what people have to really understand. This is not an upset stomach. This is a life-threatening disease that could that's really, really scary and serious. A couple questions that are coming in here. FARE's made so many connections over the last decade. Can you share a connection FARE's helped make for you?
Oh, well, I mean, I guess besides the friends and the network that I have made, FARE connected me to the doctor, Dr. Kari Nadeau, who was the clinician or the scientist who was running the clinical trial out in Stanford that Andy was part of. And actually, a woman by the name of Kim Yates, who I met at a food allergy luncheon, introduced me to Kari way, way back when. And Kim has gone on to start a food allergy clinic herself because her daughter was one of Kari's first patients. And Latitude was started because she felt that people should have options just like FARE. And, she actually works on the board of ambassadors for FARE.
Yep. Kim's an amazing person, and then so is Kari.
Yes.
Again, before I take this next question, to the listeners, thank you guys for joining in. We're really appreciative and grateful for having listened to the conversation. Don't forget to participate in Gratitude Tuesday. Make a donation to FARE. We greatly appreciate your support. It will go towards mitigating risk today, advancing research, and ultimately driving solutions to your family and to your network and to your friends' family. So we appreciate it. When you think about, I hear this a lot from families. Oh, feel free to introduce me to anybody. This food allergy community is so tight knit and so supportive. Do you often, what's the number one question I get, or a question you get often, doesn't be number one, from newly diagnosed families? I know we talked a little bit about it earlier, but when somebody connects you to somebody, I know we've shared stories about these things before. I'll say, hey, Kim, can I throw this person your way? They're really struggling with this or struggling with that. When you speak to a new parent or someone that's newly diagnosed, maybe an adult, is there one kind of common theme that comes through? Is it just pure, are they terrified, or kind of what are some of the things that you're hearing now? Is it different than 20 years ago when Andy was diagnosed, or is it the same questions, or what are you hearing from these families that are reaching out for help?
I mean, I think it ranges. I think, there's fear, obviously, because this is all new and uncharted territory. And depending on how young the child is, that differs. I think there's a frustration that we're still living with this and that there's not enough that's being done by Congress and the government and the FDA to move this forward. There's lots of drug companies out there that are doing good work, good research, coming up with things. And, it just needs to be moving faster, which is why, of course, you've said that, giving money to FAIR and to research and advancing this will hopefully help us move the needle. I think it's more of, how am I going to do this? What is my day-to-day going to look like when my child is not in my care? What is going to happen? How am I going to control if somebody gives him a Reese's peanut butter cup, or any of that, when they're not old enough? Even with a caregiver, it could be your own parent. I mean,
Yeah.
There were times that I had to sort of go over things 100 times with my mother to say, don't do this, don't do that. So the best intended person, makes a mistake. We're all human. So, I think
No,
it's
sorry.
that.
I heard a funny story from someone actually we both know, but I'll keep them nameless because we are live on Facebook. Their parents couldn't understand why they couldn't have mixed nuts and raisins on their coffee table. And they're like, well, because your grandchild is highly allergic to these things. Like, well, we'll just move them up here. It's like, no, they're not moving it up here. It's out of the house. It's no longer in the house. So, and obviously once they got through them, they understood it, but it's a cultural shift. To that point, obviously a loved one getting through to them, you hear the, tiger moms or dads, and, I've got 3 young kids, and we're very fortunate that our kids don't have food allergies. What advice do you give to the listeners out there, to the person who's behind the counter, or the waiter, waitress, or the school staff individual, whether it's a teacher or cafeteria staff, or anybody that's interacting with themselves or their child, their boss, who isn't being sensitive or isn't being understanding of food allergies, who's saying, what do you mean? What's the big deal? Or just don't eat it, or eat around it. How do you respond to that person to get through them? Because a lot of times, and I'm sure a lot of listeners, the gut reaction is to get really angry and confrontational. But what has worked for you in those situations? And what advice would you give to those listening?
Besides crying, no,
That's a fair response.
I'm being honest. I remember back then when it was like, why are you not listening?
Like knock on their head. Hello.
Right. Look, I think I sort of said it before, is, you need to endear yourself, or, people really have, liked Andy. And, once they sort of felt an attachment to Andy, it was okay. They were willing to, participate. Or, if you show up for other people in ways that's important to them, they'll hopefully do the same for you. And obviously that doesn't necessarily mean the kitchen staff at the school cafeteria, but, there are simple ways to be kind to other people. And I really do feel that, it should happen whether you're a food allergic parent or not. But when you're in a position that you need other people to help keep your child safe, you need to go out of your way to understand that person's lens, so that you can try to educate them and see it from their point of view. And you need to work hard at that. And I think that takes time and effort. And, I was in a fortunate position to be able to volunteer at my kids' school, and, being around, showing up, constantly trying to provide education or information that I had, I think really helped with taking care of Andy.
Yeah, that's you obviously kept your cool, which is a hard thing to do. And hats off to you for doing that. I don't know. I think a lot of people, it's a hard thing to do. And for those individuals who are listening, who are looking for some of those resources, they're on our website. So whether it's, and we've taken from you, the listeners, right? What are great examples and experiences you have had that have worked in your schools, 504 plans, et cetera. So please visit our website for those information. There's 147 FAIR support groups across the country. So obviously we're getting amazing information from Kim here, from the conversation. But if you want to speak to somebody in your community, there's a good chance of those 147 that somebody could be in your neck of the woods that we can connect you with. And obviously, we all know social media and phones and Zoom and so forth. So please reach out and don't just stop today for this conversation. A question came in. So I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know if you do, Kim, but we'll find out. What breakthroughs would you like to see FAIR make in the next 10 years? That's a hard question, I know. So obviously we want to ultimately see a cure for 32 million Americans. We want to prevent this disease from others happening. You know, that takes time. I don't think we're in a position, unfortunately, to make a promise that that's going to happen in 10 years. So I don't know if anything comes to your mind specifically there. You know,
I would say, I think better access to EpiPens for anyone in all communities. I think there's tragically some deaths of children in situations where people don't have an EpiPen, they don't understand their kid has a food allergy. And I think there are communities that have not had the resources, their school systems or even their doctors have not gotten the information. And so it's hard for them to disseminate the information to their communities. So I would like to see more, you know, rural communities, even places in cities have more information and more access about this disease.
So important. Access to care is a huge problem in all health areas, but specifically here in food allergy. And we're seeing that through some of the data. And a shout out to my colleagues, Anita Roach, Paul Scribner, and some others who are really doing some great work thanks to the generosity of a number of families who have jumped in to support that. A couple other questions coming through here. Any advice for those of us fundraising? How can I get, and thank you, whoever asked that question for asking it, we appreciate it. Any advice for those of us fundraising? How can I get friends and family to give FAIR $25 or better, $25 a month? So before you answer that, I'll give a little quick little shout out. The FAIR Champions program is our monthly giving program. We just launched it a couple weeks ago. If you do decide to give monthly, you'd be joining 150 other families who just signed up to do that. It's such an amazing way to make an extraordinarily meaningful gift. Has a tremendous impact on driving solutions to food allergic families. So shout out to that. But to the question for you, Kim, any advice for those on how they can fundraise themselves?
Look, I think if you have young children and, you know, obviously telling friends and family to go to FAIR's website, you know, hit the donate button. I think there's a donate option today. But, you know, simple things like a lemonade stand or stuff like that, you can start small, you get your kids involved and, you know, all of a sudden somebody's leaving them $5 for that lemonade. And, you know, it's sort of those community things that draw people together. And I think work better on the fundraising things. I mean, you know, because people are just starting to get together now, hopefully we're past COVID and we'll get to be in person and be together and celebrate FAIR 10th anniversary and, you know, have situations where people come together to learn and give, you know, dollars, whether it's $5, $25, $25 million, whatever it is, to advance this cause.
No, you're totally right. Philanthropy is about being meaningful and giving a meaningful gift. So every dollar really counts and is so appreciated by this organization and by our leadership, Kim and others on the board. So we are grateful for that and we thank you. You know, you sort of answered it there. When you look at FAIR and you look at some of our research, actually, before I ask that question, I do want to reference the 10 years out, the crystal ball. We talked a little bit about things 20 years ago and 10 years ago. And I had a conversation with a colleague, someone from our community this morning, a little bit about oral food challenges and the struggle that she was having getting her child to go through them, and the struggles that she has personally to take off days of work to go do that. It's a hard thing to do. So obviously Andy loves not being desensitized to the allergens that he was allergic to. That's obviously number one. If Andy was here, what would he say about the oral food challenge? And does he miss it?
He definitely does not miss it. Listen, it was, when I talk to parents, newly diagnosed parents, or even people who have children that are older, that now, the child is willing or interested in thinking about oral immunotherapy or what options there might be. I always say that it's not easy. And I always say I was mean. And, I think it was maybe Joan Cusack who said in School of Rock, I said, it was at School of Rock, I said some things to the Make-A-Wish Foundation that I'm not proud of or something. It's like,
yes.
I've done some things, we did some things with Andy, getting him to eat his doses of the nuts and stuff like that I'm not proud of.
But you had to do it.
It worked. But we had to do it. And we had to make it in milkshakes and in brownies and in applesauce and in pudding. And, I was lucky because when Andy started his clinical trial, he had a childhood friend, Kayla, shout out to Kayla Ryan, and Karen, Kayla's mom, and Patrick. Their family was going through this at the same time as we were, and literally, like, they were in the same room going through the food challenges and doing this together. And that was a big deal to have somebody else to lean on. And I always say to people, you can call me whatever time of night, somebody introduced me and I'm like, if you go ahead and do this, I'll help you, because I want to see more people get to the place where Andy is.
And that is, that's so probably, I think that's a microcosm of this community. We sort of started talking about your journey and that feeling that you could be alone. There's 32 million Americans who have food allergy and have this disease. For those listening, you're not alone. You're a part of this amazing community that FAIR takes a lot of pride in leading and being a part of it and being collaborative. So there's a number of people that we could thank, from the scientists to the patients, to the caregivers, to our partners, the partner organizations. But ultimately, this is a community that together will advance this cause and ultimately bring us to our desired goals of really a cure and ending this disease. And I'm proud to work for an organization and work for a community that is so passionate and welcoming and warm, and really focused on ultimately doing exactly that and driving those solutions. So we are actually over time, which is great. So I want to first thank our audience for your questions. They were really insightful, and I hope we were able to address those, or Kim was able to. Kim, thank you for being a board member, an advocate, leader, for being a friend. We're really fortunate to be able to work with you and your family. And I don't know if you have any last remarks you'd want to share, but we are genuinely grateful for the support that everybody's contributed today and in the days before and the days after this. But know that your support is going to really drive impact and solutions. So thank you guys so much.
I would say thank you, Michael. I would just say that, don't settle, and remember that you're not alone, and there's lots of resources. And the more money you give to FAIR, the more resources we'll have. So I'll leave everyone with that. And, that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. We are signing off here. Support FAIR, support your community, and we appreciate you being a part of ours.